Have you ever felt like an alien in your own world, like the more you think, the less you connect with others? You're not imagining things. Society has always feared deep thinkers, not because they're wrong, but because they see what others don't want to. And this isn't just a feeling, history is filled with proof. Stick around, because this is going to change how you see the world, and yourself. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds have been ridiculed, silenced, or ignored, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they made people uncomfortable. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, believed that intelligence itself was a curse, one that isolates those who see the world too clearly. But why? Why does society resist those who think differently? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Think about this: when you stand next to someone physically strong, you don't necessarily feel weak, you admire their strength. When you meet someone wealthy, you might envy them, but you don't feel personally attacked. But when you encounter someone intellectually superior, something strange happens. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just introduce new ideas, they reflect back the limitations of those around them. And people don't forgive that easily. The mere presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if the deep thinker says nothing at all. But why does this happen? Why does intelligence, more than any other kind of superiority, provoke such discomfort? To understand this, let's consider how our minds process different forms of superiority. Physical strength or wealth are external. We recognize them, but they don't necessarily challenge our core self-perception. However, intelligence operates differently. Unlike strength or wealth, intelligence is deeply tied to identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. When we meet someone who thinks on a deeper level, someone who questions what we take for granted, it can feel like a direct attack on our sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many people subconsciously resist it, not because the deep thinker is arrogant, but because their presence forces others to confront their own limitations. This is why, throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes of society. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And human beings will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever tried to introduce a deep idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Have you ever noticed how quickly people shift topics when discussions move beyond surface-level chatter? Share your stories in the comments below. You're not alone. This isn't coincidence, it's a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their mind goes into self-preservation mode. Instead of being curious, they resist. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. This is why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries often find themselves isolated, not because they want to be alone, but because society pushes them away. Interestingly, studies show that confidence is often valued more than intelligence in social settings. People are drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This is why charismatic but simplistic thinkers gain more influence than deep thinkers who speak with nuance. History is full of examples: populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers, who thrive by telling people what they want to hear, rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs often struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence: the more someone seeks truth, the more they become disconnected from the majority. The mirror effect doesn't just reflect society's limitations, it highlights why society resists change in the first place. But if intelligence is so threatening, is there scientific proof that people actually fear it? Modern neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking is not just intimidating, it triggers a primal survival response, similar to what we feel when facing danger. But why does intelligence activate the same fear circuits as a physical threat? The answer lies in how human brains evolved. For most of human history, survival depended not on being the smartest, but on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors thrived in tribes, where social harmony meant safety. Being rejected could mean death, as isolation led to vulnerability. This is why human brains are wired for social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. When someone highly intelligent enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt the tribal balance. Their presence challenges existing ideas, social norms, and group dynamics. This triggers the brain's defense mechanism, as if facing a potential enemy, rather than just a deeper thinker. This is why many deep thinkers feel isolated, not because they lack social skills, but because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. A 2021 Stanford University study uncovered something even more shocking: the rejection of deep thinkers is context-dependent. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But in group settings, the threat response spikes dramatically. Why? Because social status becomes more important in groups. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels outshined, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude the deep thinker to protect their social standing. This explains why deep thinkers often find genuine conversations in private settings but struggle to engage in large social environments. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that further explain why intelligence is often met with resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect: people with low ability often overestimate their intelligence, while highly intelligent people tend to doubt themselves. This creates friction. Status quo bias: the human brain prefers familiar ideas over new, complex truths. Intelligence often introduces disruptive thoughts, which make people uncomfortable. The backfire effect: when people are confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, they don't change their minds, they double down on their existing views. Deep thinkers often face this reaction. In the digital age, social media has amplified this rejection. Algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, meaning that controversial, emotionally charged content spreads faster than thoughtful arguments. The more intellectual someone is, the harder it is for them to compress deep ideas into bite-sized, viral-friendly content. As a result, society increasingly favors entertainment over enlightenment, making it even more challenging for deep thinkers. What is even more interesting is how society embraces comfort, a world of predictability over truth, and to understand this idea, we must look to one of the brutal and honest philosophers. Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's philosophy was built on a concept he called the will, an irrational force that drives human behavior. According to him, most people seek comfort and pleasure, deep thinkers on the other hand, seek truth, even if it leads to pain. This causes a disconnect between intellectuals and society, where most people find meaning in relationships and entertainment. Deep thinkers feel disillusioned. Schopenhauer believed that the more you understand human nature, the harder it is to relate. Deep thinkers crave depth and meaningful conversations, which is hard to find, and society prefers surface-level topics. This is why intelligent people are misunderstood, because they force others to think more deeply than they are willing to. But if society does not embrace intelligence, how can deep thinkers thrive? If we look at history, we see a pattern. Socrates was put on trial for corrupting the youth. His real crime was encouraging people to think. Galileo proved that the earth revolved around the sun. The church deemed this to be a crime. They threatened to kill him. Nietzsche was dismissed as insane, yet today his ideas of philosophy still influence society. Tesla, the man dreamed of free energy, but was shut down by industrialists. Alan Turing, his work saved millions of lives, yet society castrated him, which led to his death. Hypatia of Alexandria, she taught scientific reasoning, but she was brutally murdered, because she was deemed a threat. What do all of these people have in common? They were ahead of their time, and society punished them for it. Society does not fear intelligence, it fears what intelligence represents, change. So how can deep thinkers find their place? It isn't easy, because society prefers comfort over truth, but you can start by accepting that not everyone is ready for deep conversations. Find people who think like you, because you don't need everyone to understand you, you just need a few. The greatest thinkers in history had to make their ideas accessible, and you must find ways to communicate with others without overwhelming them. If this resonates with you, what are some ways you have learned to deal with being a deep thinker? Let me know in the comments. And while society may fear deep thinkers, it is deep thinkers who push humanity forward. So, if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, remember this: you're not broken, you're simply seeing the world for what it really is. And while society may resist deep thinking, it's the deep thinkers who ultimately drive progress. The question is, are you ready to embrace your own intellectual depth, even if it means standing apart? Don't let the world silence your mind. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking truth. And most importantly, connect with others who share your passion for deep thinking. Like this video if you found it insightful, subscribe for more explorations into the hidden workings of the human mind and society, and share this with anyone who you think might be a fellow deep thinker. Let's build a community of individuals who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo and embrace the power of intellectual depth.